So, this video might be a bit longer and a bit more controversial than my previous videos, but I'm hoping you guys can hear me out, because this has been asked of me for quite a while now, and I've never really gotten a chance to explain myself until now. To the atheists in my audience, I first appeal to you. Um, it's pretty much undeniable, and many of us have been arguing this point over and over again, that religion has harmed a lot more than it has helped. Whenever atheists speak against religion, oftentimes their list of atrocities tends to come up. And what I mean by this is stuff like the Inquisition, the Crusades, the witch burnings, the treatment of atheists and Jews up until about the 1960s, etc. Just the whole bunch of historical events that have made sure that the hands of religion are far from clean. Speaking just for me, I generally don't try and use this sort of argument when I'm speaking against religion because I think that religious fundamentalists will tend to bring up the point that a correlation of a lot of atrocities and the fact that these people were religious does not necessarily mean a causation. And they do have a point to a certain extent. So that's why I generally would not put forth this type of argument because, well, yes, it's a very strong correlation in my opinion. Undeniably so, if I were to be completely honest. But even if it's a strong correlation, it still does nothing to explain if it's true or not. What else is needed is a reason why why being religious in general tends to lead you to commit atrocious and immoral acts. And if we atheists do not provide evidence of such a reason, then I feel that this is moot. That bringing up all the atrocities committed by religious people in the past is pointless. That is, if there wasn't evidence of why religious people tend to do these things, which, unfortunately for my detractors, I think I have. But let's back up for a second. It is undeniable that there are crazy people out there, whether or not they are religious, atheists, or otherwise, and they will do crazy things just to further their own crazy minds. Keeping this in mind, there are a few things that I consider when I take certain situations in the picture and when I just leave them out and consider them anomalies. Let's take this as an example. If the Catholic Church had an incident of child abuse and it did not have any prior history of doing so, then I'd say, okay, that one lone church somewhere in the middle of nowhere was probably just a lone incident, especially if later on it was discovered that the priest was psychologically disturbed. But if, for example, the Catholic Church did have a history of child abuse, and it had a history of covering up that child abuse, then I consider that something relevant. For purposes of illustration, once again, I think I will use Christianity because that is the one that I am most familiar with. But this is the disclaimer. I will say that, in my opinion, no religion is truly innocent. There has been blood on everyone's hands. And that happens to include the non-religious too. There have been incidents where atheists have persecuted religious people. Very few incidents, mind you, but they are still relevant nonetheless. Let's go back to some of the common objections I hear towards this type of argument. The first and foremost would be, well, those aren't truly fill in the blank Christian in this instance. Those aren't real Christians you're talking about. Those are just people who masquerade as Christians and commit all sorts of evil deeds in the name of Christianity, but they're actually not really Christians. The first problem with this is a question I have, and that is, what exactly is there to be said about a true Christian from an untrue Christian? Is there some sort of standard that is upheld by all Christians that makes them true Christians, which separates them from untrue Christians? Some will say yes. All right then. Then I'd have to wonder, why in the bloody hell are there over 1,000 different sects of Christianity if there's only one set of rules for an objectively true Christian? Doesn't really make sense now, does it? Some will say, well, yes, there's an objective standard of what defines a true Christian from someone who's not a true Christian. The true Christian will do what's expected of them in the Bible. Well, okay, that comes with more problems. Because essentially everything is condoned in the Bible, from kindness to unkindness, from acceptance to bigotry, from being arrogant as hell about your beliefs to being humble, slavery and freedom. You know, there's a whole bunch of things that stretch the morality scale that it's really meaningless to say that someone's a true Christian. Unless, of course, you're going to cherry pick. So, despite what Christians say, they do not follow an objective standard to tell them how Christian they are. And even if that were so, that objective standard being the Bible, how Christian they are is an absolutely meaningless and incoherent term because it essentially is so broad and wide that it means everything. So, this is what we call the no true Scotsman fallacy, where there is no true way to determine who is and who is not a Christian, because no objective standard for doing so exists. Furthermore, I'd have to add, isn't God the ultimate judge? So, who the hell are you, if you really do believe in this God? Who are you to say who's not a true Christian and who is? Shouldn't that sort of thing be left up to your God? But no, I see believers making assumptions about this sort of stuff all the time. Meaning, either they are holding a double standard when it comes to their God, or they just don't trust him as much as they say they do. Lest God flies down here and tells us all himself, we have no way of determining which brand of Christianity happens to be the correct one. We have no way of determining which religion, in general, is the correct religion to be following, if it is any one of the currently existing religions at all. So essentially, this idea that these people weren't really part of the true religion is a moot point. One objection that's sort of similar to the previous one is, well, they were just taken over by Satan. Suppose, if you're a Christian, your God, God of the Bible, told you to kill a family member. Would you do it? If you won't, then you're disobeying what your God says, and that's not something a true Christian would do, right? If you are going to commit murder, then how can you say with absolute certainty that everyone else who've committed murders in the name of your particular God were just crazy when you yourself would do the same thing if you were in that situation? Not only that, but I'd also have to ask, how exactly do you determine if something that comes into your mind is put there by your God or whether it's you and your own delusion? How do you distinguish between the two? You have no real objective way of doing so, now do you? And that really brings into question whether or not this God is very intelligent, if this God even exists. Because if I could see the obvious flaw in this logic, then I'm pretty sure a supposedly omniscient God would be able to see it just like that. The third objection comes in the form of, well, I don't deny that these things might have been caused by religion, but religion has also caused some good deeds to be done as well. And I'd have to say, I agree. Well, there's no denying that several people have been religiously inspired to become good people and help others, and I don't deny this fact. But, and here's the big but, I also have to say that the good, the small, relatively small amount of good religion has done, compared to the relatively large cost that has come with it, is really not something to be ignored here. Religion, like racism, has never killed anyone directly. Rather, it causes people, it gives people, normally moral and ethical people, a reason to commit evil and atrocious acts because they think they're doing the right thing. But wait, truth, you might say. There are a lot of religious people in modern society today. I mean, you don't all see Christians in church going, we're going to murder that next person that we see that's an atheist or a homosexual. Down with the atheists and homos. Well, you don't see that, right? So that proves basically that religion is not evil, right? Wrong. Back then, religion was at least a billion times more evil, a billion times more hurtful, a billion times more illogical. Only because we reached the Enlightened Era, only because atheists and skeptics grew in number and we started to fight back, only because skepticism became something of the norm, does religion lose its power. Religion is a much different beast than it was before. And that's something I am grateful for, eternally grateful, because not only would we have been stuck in an era of non thinking, of attributing everything to God of the gaps, not only would we have no scientific advances whatsoever, but we would also not have any of the freedoms that we have today. Just think about it for a second. Freedom of thought? Nope. Freedom of speech? Don't even go there. Women's rights? Ha ha ha, no. Gay and homosexual rights? Nope. The right to believe what you will? Nope. You really have no rights if religion had its way. Luckily and thankfully for us, it didn't. And I attribute that to secularism, and only because secularism was on the rise. Really, if you guys are going to attribute any of the rights we take for granted today as because of religion, I'd really like to see evidence of a theocracy which allowed its people to think what they will and believe what they will. Because to my recollection, that's never been the case. Still don't believe me? How about a more concrete example? Islam was once the pinnacle of scientific and mathematic discovery. Hell, they practically invented algebra and we use Arabic numerals today. But around the 12th century, when Islam had a dogma, when it grew in number in terms of fundamentalists, when it started becoming a dogmatic religion, kissed its ass goodbye. Down went your freedoms, down went discovery, down went your quality of life. Now it became a state where it was ruled by religious fundamentalists who relied on dogma to make their decisions. And you know what? Islam has never recovered since. So what can I say in conclusion? Well, I can say that if anyone decides to use this argument that religion hurts people because of all the things committed in the past, then they should support it, first of all, with something like the evidence that I provided. But to those who would refute those or dismiss them out of hand just because they think personally that it's a few fundamentalists here and there, or that it was all justified by all the good things done by religion, then I'd really have to say that speaks volumes. With all due respect, it speaks volumes about how indoctrinated they are, when they are not willing to concede for a second that what they believe in has killed millions of people and caused millions more to suffer. It is, to me, intellectually lazy. It is a little arrogant, a little rude, and just downright dishonest if a theist tries to use any of these justifications when it comes to this sort of argument. Thanks for watching. May the truth always be heard.